Want to find your seat for the event of your choice but can't get one that fits your desire or your budget? Well, my friends, SeatGeek has you covered. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show. With a list of over hundreds of events to choose from, SeatGeek will assure you that you won't miss your seat with the amazing deal of your choice at the most affordable price. Whether it's looking for your best seat in the house of your favorite sports team, finding live concerts that get you closer to your favorite artist, or enjoying your spot at your favorite live shows, comedies, and more, SeatGeek has it all just for you. Go online to SeatGeek.com or download the app on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And as a special offer before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS and save yourself $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket and experience why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Remember, that's SeatGeek.com and download the app on your phone with promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off and find your seat with SeatGeek.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome on a Hump Day Wednesday for every single one of you, wherever and however you may be watching. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show. We are live on all platforms, Roku, iHeartRadio, and all social media platforms known to man. Also live on TikTok for all of our fans out there. I'm excited for it. Chase Steph is joining us here, our co-host. Man, Chase, we got a lot to talk about because you know what? News got out there, and if you know what I'm talking about, it's going to be really interesting. And I love Hard Knocks, but there's got to be a reason that stuff just gets out there and for us to really kind of talk about it. So I'm interested to see everybody's points up on this. But great guest, Luke Hetrick. For all of you in the metro Atlanta area, he's going to be joining us here in a couple minutes. Really kind of be talking a lot about some Atlanta sports. I'm excited about it. Chase, how are we doing tonight, man? Oh, looks like he might be getting the sound on real quick. Yeah, it's really interesting, but we'll see if he's got his audio up here in a second. But real quickly, Luke Hetrick joining us here in a couple of minutes. So, all right, look, I love Hard Knocks. I think Hard Knocks is fantastic. It is one of those, reality shows, in my opinion, that you get a chance to be up close and personal with all of the NFL teams. And this year, it's the New York Giants. So the story on this today is that there was a clip in Hard Knocks, and it explained about Saquon Barkley and the state of where they were with the Giants. Saquon, I do think, is a hell of an athlete. I mean, the guy, he's built, he's big, and in the last few years since he's been with the Giants, he's suffered multiple injuries. And at the same time, I never knew exactly where this organization was going at all. With Dave Gettleman and then bringing in Joe Shane to really kind of build some clarity in this organization, it just kind of seemed like it was a complete tire fire. And in a big sports market like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, to like many different places, the second that you get, not on the same page, the communication's off, and at the same time, you don't know exactly where the build with potentially if this team's going to be making it into the playoffs. Now, this team did make it in the playoffs in the past with the first year Brian Dable was in this clubhouse. And they surprised a lot of people. They beat the Minnesota Vikings, who had the best record in close games. So that was a big upset for them. They were able to pull it off. But then what really kind of set things off was when the Giants gave Daniel Jones his contract extension for $45 million a year. And that's where things really kind of ticked off. So in Hard Knocks, Joe Shane was on the phone with Saquon Barkley and was being brutally honest, but then at the same time, you just saw the underlying truth of what the Giants are. And Saquon, I'm not saying he made the bad decision going to Philadelphia, because you want to be in the best position possible. That's for any of us, whether in business or in relationships or in life in general. And I think Saquon, why he chose Philadelphia. One, he went to school at Penn State, and he was arguably one of the best running back talents in that rookie class. And he's close by to home, loves the environment, and I think it honestly gives the Eagles a boost because they haven't been able to really generate enough of consistent rushing abilities there. But even though Jalen Hurts can run, multiple others, like multiple running backs they've had in the past, they tried to run, but in the same time, it was just not enough consistency. I mean, Joe Shane, he was brutally honest and told Saquon, like, hey, we think that the best thing to do is to explore the market. And Saquon understood that. There was no animosity. There was no grudges that were beheld. So he went and tested the market. I mean, for any of us, we want to be paid respectfully in any business that we are in because we're selling our brand. We're selling ourselves. And we're basically saying, hey, I'm capable of doing a lot of these things. I have my certificates. I have my degrees, which, sometimes you don't even need that. You just need to have the amount of experience and what are you doing currently. And I think in the end, both parties, they decided to split ways. I just felt like the comment that Joe Shane made afterward is what really summed up about what the Giants are. The Giants, I can't take them seriously. That's why I think this year, there'll be some improvements, but my hope is that Brian Daboll really gets this team back up to where they initially were when he first arrived, because it was a dumpster fire until he came in. And yet they changed general managers because Dave Gettleman, for 10 years, only one playoff appearance for this organization. And so Joe Shane had to change a lot of things. But it's a lot of pressure on his shoulders. You got to get it right. And what I say to a lot of people, and sometimes this is the hard truth reality, when you go and chase for more money, sometimes there may be some issues involved you may not know about. But you got to make the best of every situation. And I think for both parties, Saquon said, look, I love the Giants fan base. I have no grudges. But I refuse to be in somewhere where I feel like I'm not important. And I think that's initially where they drew the line. So Saquon goes to Philly. The Giants end up signing Devin Singletary. And they have to get Daniel Jones to work. Because right now, it don't look promising for $45 million a year. And you got an injury, which nothing against him. It's not his fault. But the offensive line was not great. So you then lost two quarterbacks and you had to start Tommy DeVito. So the Giants, they beefed up their defense, especially the pass rush with Brian Burns, and they still have Dexter Lawrence and multiple others. But I just hope that the Giants know what they're doing. Because in the end, Hard Knocks, you could be brutally honest up onto the show. That's what it's all about. We love, trying to understand what really happened behind closed doors. And I think, why did that clip get out there? Sometimes people want it out there because they want clarity. They want an understanding what happened between the two. And I think you got it. I think the Giants were going a different direction because, to be honest, I would have maybe paid Saquon a reasonable fortune before I would have paid $45 million to Daniel Jones, who had only had one playoff win. I would have given him at least a league minimum at best. Still pay him respectfully, but I want to keep the consistency of my offense. So the fact that the two sides couldn't really see eye to eye just told you exactly what happened initially, and that's where Saquon is now a proud member of the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, so there's a lot of things that's been going on, especially with the in the Atlanta area. The Atlanta Braves right now been trying to figure out a lot of things, especially with two stars that have been shut down. But All-Star game is right up around the corner. There's a lot that we really got to break down. So joining me, for all of you guys that are in the Metro Atlanta area, you see him on television all the time. And so to be joining us here, Luke Hetrick joining the show. All right, Luke. Well, around the corner we are with the, MLB All-Star Game, and we have three Bravos that are going to be representing Atlanta. So let's start there with Marcell Ozuna, who is a home run derby candidate, and he's also up into the All-Star Game. My hope with Marcell Ozuna, from what we got last year, injuries were a big reason that the Braves kind of had to figure out any and everything that they could with the roster that they got. So this year with Ozuna, I felt like this was a big push this year. How have you kind of evaluated and really kind of explained in best details what you've gotten from Ozuna this year and what we may see for the rest of the remainder of the season?
First off, coming in hot, bringing on a Penn State fan to talk Saquon on a muted mic, and then going straight to the Braves is a little bit torture. I loved your take on it. I loved your evaluation of everything. I actually have not seen that Hard Knocks episode yet, so I'm kind of saving it for right now. But look, as far as Marcell Ozuna goes, he's had to be thrust into a little bit of a different role, because what we've come to appreciate about the Braves and how they've been built under Alex Anthopoulos, and really giving credit to Brian Snitker, what he's been able, is they've been able to get great contracts, great value in those contracts, and really find guys that they can get on good value to build up an offensive juggernaut. We saw that with the historic numbers they were putting up in 2023. They're not even coming close to scratching that. A lot of that is due to injury. A lot of that was slow starts to a guy like Austin Riley. Matt Olson has not had anywhere close to the caliber season, specifically from a power standpoint, that he's had a year ago. So much of this has been thrust on Marcell Ozuna to really be on pace for the best season of his career statistically. What has been very, very clear with his approach is nothing has changed. And you see this, and this was something we talked to him after he was named an All-Star the other day. The question immediately comes out when the mics are off. You could go in the home run derby. He's like, oh, I don't know. But he was so excited about being in it. And he's a guy that at first I'm like, ooh, I don't know. If I'm a Braves fan, do I want him in the home run derby? But he never changes his swing. He doesn't swing for power. He swings for contact. So for me, this is just the maturation in his career. I think he's come to an Atlanta organization that's been the perfect spot to foster growth. For him, this is just a product of being in the right environment, taking necessary steps forward. I mean, when you really think about it, this is a 7-year gap for him between All-Star game appearances. And he mentioned that he's much more mature now. Atlanta's been the right place for him, but I think this is just a guy that's accepted his role, not tried to do anything special, and just had a really, really quality season, still leading the National League in RBI, is up there even after a little bit of a dip in the Triple Crown category. So there's nothing out of the ordinary. He's increased his value specifically for this season. And from an offensive standpoint, he's kept this Braves team afloat when they've really had some issues, largely due to injury and slow starts on the offensive end.
Yeah, and he's been very much, a fun watch, in my opinion, especially with just the juggernaut of that lineup itself, because there's no way that you could pitch it around that. And so I think he's put up a great season. I think he's put up great numbers, and we'll see exactly how the offense really pans out from it. So Chris Sale, all right, so this was a guy that when the Braves took him on, my takeaway was this is a guy that's trying to get himself back into form as he once was as a former Cy Young winner from the White Sox and then with the Red Sox. And so when bringing in Chris Sale, I felt like this was an absolute boost of a guy that can come in if an injury happens, and then look what happened. Spencer Strider ends up getting injured. How impressed are you right now with Chris Sale and what he's really been able to provide in that pitching rotation?
Incredibly impressed with what he's been able to do. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but it kind of is, because like you just mentioned, he had gone through about 6 years of we don't know. He mentioned that the other day after that series finale against the Phillies, in which they took that 2 out of 3 for the second time this year. I didn't know if I was going to get back. I didn't know what my career was going to turn into. There were some down years, and it took an organization to really have a tough conversation with me. I had to come to grips with where I was at, and the Braves were honest about it, and they thought, we still think you can be an elite pitcher. And I think it was a place for him to come where he didn't have to be coming into a situation, like you mentioned, have to be the guy. The pressure was off. When you had Spencer Strider, coming off the season he did a year ago, Max Fried, whose stock continues to rise, who a lot of people in the Atlanta market were surprised initially that he was not an all-star after the season that he's had, ERA slightly over 3. But Chris Sale just coming in, it's a veteran in the lineup, another lefty, and he's been absolutely outstanding. It's been a revival for him, and it seems like Atlanta is a place where guys can come and revive their careers a little bit. Brian Snitker is a manager that everyone simply loves playing for. So I've been incredibly impressed, but really from, just a humanity side of thing. We've seen Chris Sale, be the alpha. We've seen that out of a starting pitcher. It's not uncommon. But just for him to really be able to get real with us and be like, I didn't know what was going to happen. Someone asked him about something down the road about looking back at the season. He's like, dude, I am just like living in the moment here. Because I think it's a guy that has some perspective, and he has been completely valuable for what they've needed this season, given what's happened to Spencer Strider.
Yeah, and I really like how he's been able to plug in, and especially helping out with this rotation that, decimated with injuries, but they're kind of more of that needle hanging on a thread, where they want to be competitive and they still want to be, especially when you got the Phillies that you're facing every single year in that division. So I've been very impressed with it, and I'm very happy that he's been back into, the similar form, given with the injuries that he has been barring in the last couple of years. So finally, Ronaldo Lopez. So here's my thought with this. Watching him from his time in Washington and then kind of bouncing around the league, I felt like this was a kid that was in need of a home. He comes to Atlanta, and he's already turning a lot of heads. People are starting to see with, the control. I felt like he really has been working the zone a lot better than what we've seen in the past. So what's really clicked with Ronaldo Lopez? Because I just think you come into an organization and you thought you could get, the best of your capabilities and your skill set from the control, the velocity, and all of that. I felt like coming to Atlanta, he's found a lot of that stuff. So what's really kind of been like the thing that really clicked for Ronaldo Lopez?
I think it's what's being asked of him. They know this is a guy for the better part of since about 2016, he's been a reliever. So having that transition of coming in and starting again, you have guys typically in Strider and Chris Sale throughout his career, specifically this year, Max Fried, they can go 7 innings, and it's not a problem. And their pitch counts can get up there. But if they have it going, they have it going. Ronaldo Lopez, Brian Snitker hasn't asked him to do too much. He's got the number of quality starts, to be in contention for the awards at the end of the year. But, what impressed me is one of the first times I covered him was early in the season. It was about mid-April. They're playing the Marlins, which, again, at that time, take all those stats with a grain of salt with that Marlins lineup. It was getting into the 7th. He had just wrapped up the 7th inning. And I believe it was he actually went into the 8th. And he was on about 82 pitches. The efficiency is which he was able to work with, that Brian Snitker felt, okay, hey, he's going past 5 innings, but a lot of these innings were, 8, 10. So he has been able to balance that out, not try and blow guys away, just be able to find his control, like you mentioned. And it's because he's not asked to go very deep. They've had very much success in the bullpen, specifically when he's been able to, go into those 5th innings, 5th, 6th innings. So I think it's one of those, not asking too much of them, knowing it's the transition. Maybe as they get deeper, they ask a little bit more, but right now he's really comfortable doing it. And it's just Brian Snitker understanding the capabilities of his guys and not asking them too much, not asking them to do anything uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love, the culture and, just kind of the more of the mental focus that the Braves have been having. And I mean, Brian Snitker really has been that pillar that really has been making it happen for this organization. So it's been great seeing a lot of these players grow into what we'd hope for. I mean, Jarred Kelenic geez, this guy's having a great year. He's finally finding his stroke. He's a guy that really is becoming a force in that lineup. So it's like anything could happen at this point with this lineup.
And I love that you mentioned it because it was such an experiment because they were just spoiled rotten for so long with Ronald Acuna batting in that one spot. I mean, 337 had the 47 year the year prior. And then when he went down, there was a stretch of about 20 games where they had a total of 6 leadoff hits, trying to balance between Ozzie Albies and Michael Harris before he was injured, had his hamstring issues, and still working his way back on that. Jared Kelenic was a guy that everyone went, wait a minute, after a little bit of the experiment, wasn't he lead off in Seattle? Didn't he do that? So I asked him, after a couple of games, was there ever a conversation? Because he had immediate success in that leadoff spot. He said, no, Snit never approached it. We never had a conversation. It's not like I went to him and said, hey, I can do this. Kelenic just took a back seat, and it was one of those, when your number's called, be ready to go. And it was really coupled with his success in that leadoff spot. At the same time, Austin Riley started to find his power again. I believe that was a guy through the first, 50-some games, only had 3 home runs. And, from that point now has 8 or 9 since then. So he's kind of found his form again. So that the timing of those two in the leadoff spot and finding power again was really welcome to this lineup that had struggled for so much. And look, the numbers say they're an average lineup, and a lot of that is due to injury. But once you get past, I believe in August, late August, they will have their final 7 meetings with Philly in about a 12-day stretch. After that, 6 of their last 8 series are against sub-500 teams. So there's an opportunity here for them to get healthy, have the benefit of a schedule late in the season to make a charge, because 2022, I'm not saying they're going to do that, but they have the experience to chase down someone. Philly's different, but than the Mets were in 2022. But you couple that with the fact then that, like I said, and Alex Anthopoulos at the deadline always has something up his sleeve. Riley said it a couple weeks ago. Yeah, I expect him to do something. Alex will pull off some miracle again, like he always does. So there is that in the back pocket. But it's an uphill battle because the Phillies have their number in the playoffs, not in the regular season this year, but the Phillies in the playoffs, and the Phillies red hot. You do not want to have to play more games at Citizens Bank Park in the fall. No one wants to do that.
Oh, yeah. There's some unfinished business that's there, especially with.
But they don't fear Philly. They do not fear Philly at all, but they understand the challenge it is going into Philly. It's tough.
Oh yeah. So, and it's funny you mentioned it because, I've spoken to many people that have covered all their respective teams. And we know that come the All-Star game, everybody's getting a break. And at the same time, every team is evaluating with what they've started with. And now you come into the crunch times, because this is usually when it gets important, because August, September, October, it's the most important months. And that's a fun time of baseball because you really start to see each other's identity. So the Braves, the situation that they're in, they've lost 2 pivotal stars due to injuries, Spencer Strider and Ronald Acuna Jr. I watched from even at the time when they won the title in 21, they made 2 power bat moves with Jock Peterson and Jorge Soler, and then they added in some utility arms where if I need a guy in the 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th, those are the perfect arms I'm going to put together. Is there a little something that I think we might see some sort of similarity possibly coming into the trade deadline for the Braves?
I think so, because initially what a lot of people had pointed out was, 21, they won the World Series, didn't have Ronald Acuna Jr. So I think there was that immediate comparison. And a lot of fans were quick to hop on this. Signed Eddie Rosario to a minor league deal, saw him come up the other night. He had a triple in his second at-bat in Gwinnett in AAA. So I think there's going to be some type of move, because I think the lesson, I don't want to call it a lesson, but what the Braves learned last year was not doing much at the deadline. Everyone's operated as this window. This was similar to what we saw during the, division title run in the 90s and early 2000s. It was the window. The window was open. They were always going to be competitive, and they end up with the 1 World Series title. They have their title with this window. And a lot of people keep saying, what would be great is if they get the second one and they still have the talent, the gap, all these guys under contract for X amount of time. The window is starting to shut. It started to shut last year after a loss to a Phillies. It's not going to hang like this. it's going to keep going down. So now you add in these injuries. I think they will be a little more aggressive because what type of player is Ronald Acuna Jr. going to be coming back? This is another pitching injury to Spencer Strider. So I think Alex Anthopoulos is going to be ultra aggressive. What type of move they make, I'm not really sure. I do think there's another power bat to be added in this lineup, just given the inconsistency so far. But I would not be surprised if there's something that we're sitting here a month from now going,
yeah,
and it's not a great market. It's not. But if they got that dude for how much? So we've done it a couple times before, so I don't think it's out of the question.
Yeah, it really is going to be interesting. I mean, I would not be surprised if that's
exactly
the thing that Alex Anthopoulos, this is a guy that even when I watch a lot of these NFL GMs, I mean, they just have a magic up their sleeve. And so who knows what Alex has up his sleeve, but, again, barring the talent and barring what they've got as far as the salaries that they're paying for right now, hopefully it really does pan out for him because, I mean, you got the Dodgers knocking on the door, the Phillies, all these other teams in the in the National League, they're wanting to compete for that World Series title. So shifting on, because I've seen you got some Orlando gear right there behind you, but this NBA free agency, it has been quite an interesting one, in my opinion, because I've now got Paul George now balling up in Philly. I've got Klay Thompson now up in Dallas. So to kind of focus with, Magic on this one, I think KCP really is an important role player coming into a very young core group that is really trying to find themselves. But they definitely needed some shooters after what we saw in the postseason. But I think Paolo Banchero and even a lot of these other youngsters that they've got right now on this roster, I mean, how important is KCP now in this potential lineup and what he'll bring to the table as far as veteran experience?
He's one of the best fits in free agency you could find for a team as far as needs go. This organization, really the last 2 years, Jamal Mosley's been there 3, but under him the last 2 years, they've fought above their weight class. They've been able to be extremely competitive with some of the better teams in the league, not being able to shoot, having inconsistent point guard play, which are two things that we go, how can you survive with that? But they figure out ways. It's like, you have a washcloth and you're just wringing the towel dry, trying to get whatever you can out of it. And that's what he's been able to do. You saw the shooting inconsistencies in the playoffs. That should not, based on how they shot the ball, should not have been a 7-game series. That should have been a 5 or 6 game series. And I say that as someone that has a lot of ties to the organization. But again, they fought above their weight class. They had themselves ready to go. They were prepared for that moment. But what they lacked was true point guard play. I think now having Jalen Suggs slide into that role, solidifying that spot, understanding his role is huge. And now you're able to get someone that has better value than what they had in Gary Harris last year, who they also re-signed. But Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a guy that hits 3 main keys for the Magic and what they need and what they've needed for. And I say this really since Dwight Howard left. And it's crazy to still be talking, in those circles. Perimeter shooting, perimeter defending, and availability. Here's a guy that played 96% of games throughout his career. I shouldn't say throughout his career, but the last few years, there was a number floating around. The Magic, for about a 3-year stretch, were leading the league in man games missed due to injury. They were up over 200 every year. Now, a lot of that was Jonathan Isaac getting hurt. Markelle Fultz had his injuries with shoulders and knees and whatever it may be. But now you get availability as a skill, which this organization has not had. Understanding of roles, and KCP is a guy that can slide and fit right in to the extended pressure that they want to play from their backcourt. As far as the point guard play goes, I think they're comfortable with Jalen Suggs, but this thing runs through 5. This thing runs through 5. He's the star. They all know where their bread is buttered. They haven't been able to say that for a long time. And now they have their true running mate in Franz Wagner locked up. So is it a seismic move? No. Is it the splash of Paul George going to Philly? It is not. But I think we learned our lesson, really, and solidified this argument from the Minnesota-Phoenix series is just getting the big stars in one place doesn't mean it works. And that's not saying it can't work in Philly, but chemistry matters more than anything right now in the NBA. So the Magic are riding that. You agree?
Yeah.
That's your take?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree on that because it's funny because talking about a certain topic because, like, I've said this, I think what we're seeing in the Eastern Conference, because last year, the East was absolutely weak, but yet we've got a lot of draft and development guys that are starting to come into their own. Now, I think this year, I think you could make the argument there are 6 teams out there in the Eastern Conference that I think could very much make a huge pivotal move. The Magic, the Sixers, the Knicks, after they just gave up that much for Mikal Bridges, and now they've got their lineup set. And then you've got Boston, who's fresh from a championship. So there's 6 of those teams. One team in particular, I mean, like I talked about when it came to big money markets, like, and it's a line I've always said, the more money you got, the more problems you're going to end up with. And I think right now with where I'm standing with the Lakers, I don't know what to make of it, man. I mean, they come in, and I love the pick that they got for Dalton Connect because I think he's a heck of a shooter. I think he's a guy that really is somebody they're moving for offense. But Bronny James, 21 minutes and 4 points. I mean, I know it's only that one game, but I kind of fear a little bit for Bronny because this is a guy who's coming back from a horrific injury that should have sidelined his career, but he's coming into a bigger atmosphere than in the collegiate level. And it's like, I can't really put my finger on it with the Lakers. How have you kind of like outlooked this right now with I just think this is going to be, I hate for this to be a circus show just going wrong with all that they've gotten in the last couple of months.
This reminds me of Kobe's farewell tour. The late Kobe Bryant, a handful of years ago when it was the 2-year, at the time, $48 million. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, why are you doing that? They're not going to be able to get the stars in. You know, this to me is, I don't know where they were at as an organization that they could be appealing outside of just being LA and having LeBron to where they were really going to lure people. The Klay Thompson thing, in theory, kind of fit, but he's going to a much better situation for him and his game and his development in his career in Dallas. I honestly thought he was going to be a Laker, but the Dallas move for him from a basketball standpoint, it is better. I think the Lakers have hitched their wagon too. You know, if we're not going to win games, we're going to be interesting. And people are going to talk about us, and we're going to be fun. And we have the JJ Redick LeBron thing. Anthony Davis is still a very good player. And who knows? Maybe we make a move and get some shooting, which they need. They address that with Dalton Connect in theory. But I really don't know much about them. I look at them and say, did they really get better? Have they gotten better? Enough to the point where you said maybe they make a play or get in a 6 seed, you know, if all those guys are healthy. Because Anthony Davis was healthy last year and played well and was was arguably the best defensive player in the NBA from front court standpoint. And they were 7 seed and got bounced in 5 by the Denver Nuggets. A lot of that is matchup, but how much better did they get? And is that something that they were fully committed to? We hear all this stuff of, oh, maybe DeMar DeRozan. Now, I think, my guess, is there will be a move down the road to get Trae Young. Trae Young's switching over agencies, switching over to Calvin Andrews at CAA, guy that has, you know, in that agency, LA roots. Might be something that happens in the works. I don't know how much longer he is for Atlanta, but I think there could be a move in the future that maybe makes them a little more relevant and says, we're trying. Maybe it isn't the best move. Maybe it doesn't work out. Who knows? Because the DeJounte Murray thing was flirted out for so long with LA. It was nauseating. So are they just in a position where they go into the season going, we're going to see how this works, and we're going to see with JJ what type of move needs to be made at the deadline or in the offseason next year. But for me right now, I just don't think they've gotten any better, and I think it's the old LA thing. If you're not going to win, be interesting, and Lord knows if the Lakers are interesting, people are going to talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, I made that point. The second that I saw the news that DeMar DeRozan went to the Kings, I was like, yeah, this is an L for the Lakers. The fact that you're trying to get, you know, your last shot at the very least getting another star in this roster, and then he just goes up north into Sacramento. Yeah, they're seeing something that they're like, I don't want to be a part of whatever that this is because, yeah, it's just some type of business. I don't want no part of it.
And I get it because it's like, you know, from the outside perspective, it's okay. Do I want to go there? You know, we like JJ. Can he coach? It's a LeBron. Like, how much is that going to, you know, deter players from coming there? We don't really know. We can assume all we want. But then on the other side of it, you know, I look at the Bronny situation. Weak draft, you want to spend a second-round pick on him, you go right ahead. Now, I would have thought he would have been a two-way guy. I really was shocked by the 4-year deal and the guarantee. I really was that he's, you know, guaranteed a roster spot. I thought this was a kid, just go develop. Go to South Bay, you know, learn under there, figure it out. You'll get your, you know, I forget. I always get it mixed up if it's 32 or 50 games of, you know, back and forth as on a two-way. But, you know, you'll get your opportunities. You'll play in the blowout. Dad will throw you a lob. You'll dunk it. It'll be awesome. And you know what? Like, if anyone deserves that moment, it's Bronny and LeBron. The kid almost died a year ago. You know, had a very serious heart issue. LeBron playing at the age that he is and still playing at a significantly high level is incredible. So a good story always sells. Now, I don't think it's going to win a championship. I can understand why there might be some animosity here. But you know what, dude? Happy for him. Go out and do it. And for the nepotism crowd, do we need to have that discussion? Do we need to have that discussion with the NBA? So, you know, for me, it's a cool story in that regard. But when you look at it from 10,000 feet, is it going to help him win a championship right now? No.
Yeah, no, I my hope is, and I'm crossing my fingers because with a lot of these player developments, I just hope that this develops very, very well. I would want a lot of these young players to succeed. I mean, you never want to set them up to where they fail. You know,
Right.
you want to have the best success plan possible in order for these kids to grow to where they can become future stars, and that's what we're seeing right now up and into the NBA. But it'll be quite a strange at first, but yet maybe an interesting kind of narrative that we might see with the Lakers moving forward as the season starts. But Luke, appreciate you joining on by, man. Great stuff. Anybody that tunes in on your television, check him out. He's always the best at what he does behind the camera, man. Appreciate you coming on by. Enjoy the rest of the week, man, and we shall definitely see you soon.
Jake, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. I love talking to you. Dude, have me on tomorrow, have me on next week. I don't care. This is one of the most fun shows I've ever done. No, thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Man, absolutely. Absolutely love that. Thank you, man. Well, what do you know, Chase? I think we got ourselves a fan for sure.
Probably.
Yeah. I just am like, you know, like I said, I mean, to talking about baseball, I mean, the Braves very much are lingering on. And I mean, with all these injuries, and then at the same time, Jarred Kelenic now is really starting to hit the ball well at leadoff.
Oh, yeah.
And then Austin Riley's falling. So there's always a method to somebody's madness. And I think the Braves, because of the amount of talent and the amount of experience that they've got, they're like, look, forget about the Phillies. Forget about all these other teams that are up and involved. We got to just play our way, our game that we've been playing now for the last few years and at least get this team rolling. So, I mean, you got the Mets with the grimace superstition. All this other stuff. So they've got to get this thing rolling. And I think they might have potentially found that stroke there.
They might have. I mean, it's very difficult to say. Don't want to criticize Luke or anything, but Ronald Acuna did play in that, he was on that 2021 roster and does have a ring. I had to double check to make sure, but yeah, he was definitely on that roster. The Phillies are now 7.5 games ahead in first place, and they are currently winning right now against the Dodgers and everything. And I think it's pretty safe to say that the Phillies have one of the better rosters in the league, one of the better starting pitching staffs, and one of the better bullpens in the league. I wouldn't be shocked if they make it all the way to the World Series again this year, but we got to see if they can actually pull the trigger and win, because, you know, that is the one thing that is holding them back, is like being able to finish strong. I mean, they haven't won a World Series since 2008 when Ryan Howard was on the team.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Chase Utley, Jimmy Rollins, I mean, Pat the Bat Burrell, you name it. That was such an incredible team. But yeah, I mean, the competition's brewing up, and now Jazz Chisholm is what I'm told right now by Miami. He's now apparently available during the trade deadline. That's an interesting one from there. Sure, we probably
they're also trying to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is who the Phillies are trying to get.
Oh boy. Yeah, just what we need. Another powering first baseman just to complement along with Bryce Harper, right?
Well, they're actually gonna try to transition him to third base if they get him and everything, because he's been able to play a little bit of third for the Blue Jays. So it's gonna be interesting to see what they can do. But man, it's tough.
Oh man, well, Alec Bohm is in the home run derby and he's an all-star. I don't know how you're going to handle
the
that.
most all-stars out of anybody in the MLB right now with 7.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to handle that. But that's going to be interesting. So I don't know if you want to make a point on this, but I felt like sometimes there are stories and there's clips that people just get out there for whatever reason. Is it trying to find clarity, or is it trying to think of who was right, who was wrong? I felt like because the Giants in the last 12 seasons, they've been an absolute dumpster fire under Dave Gettleman. And I feel for Joe Schoen. I know he's trying to make this organization better because the Mara family and what they've done now in the last few years since Tom Coughlin left, it has not been the same organization. It's been an embarrassment. I think they certainly, you got to figure out that turf, man. But I felt like there was no right or wrong with this situation when Joe and Saquon had that conversation on Hard Knocks. I felt like that comment that Joe Schoen made early on, later on, that just told you what I felt about the Giants. Yeah. Like that. And so I just feel like Saquon, like you and I, we're out selling our brand. We want to get the best of ourselves. So when we are there in business, this is who we are. And I want to make sure I'm protected, I'm taken care of, and I want to be in the best position to win. So I felt like Philly, you're back in your stomping grounds from Penn State, and you're going to be a part of, I think, a pretty well-ran, run-centric team at this point. So I wish nothing but the best for Saquon and hoping he has a healthy season. But I just felt like you just got a lot out of that clip.
I mean, Joe Schoen, I feel like, has made big mistakes when it comes to the New York Giants, because getting Brian Daboll in there was a huge success because of how well he was able to coach Josh Allen, and how well he was able to play, and the fact that they went to the AFC Championship with him as their OC. And then you bring him in the first year, they win 11 games, they win a playoff game versus the Minnesota Vikings, and everything's looking up and up. Well, then you look at that roster and you're like, oh my gosh, this roster is trash. And then Daniel Jones gets hurt. And, the big weakness that they had was on the right side of the line with Evan Neal. And instead of addressing the right side of the line and making that a surefire thing, you get rid of your star-powered running back. Like you sit there and say, hey, we are in the business to try to get Daniel Jones some weapons because you feel like you failed him and you haven't really got to see the best out of him and everything. Why not keep Saquon Barkley and then draft Malik Neighbors? Like, having Saquon Barkley a top 5 running back and then a guy who's been able to catch out of the backfield and, make people miss in open field and, do it all at the running back position, and then also get an explosive wide receiver, because you tried drafting a speed demon out of Jalen Hyatt. We didn't see him produce a lot last year. And then we also saw Wan'Dale Robinson come into his own a little bit towards the end of the season. But, and then this year they bring in Drew Lock to try to back up Daniel Jones just in case something happens to him. But I think it's more or less like Joe Schoen just made a huge mistake, because if you're going to sit there and say that you don't think that anybody's going to pay Saquon Barkley $12 million, then you are sorely mistaken.
Yeah, and here's my thing. I'm very critical of all my quarterbacks. If you're getting paid $45 million a year, and at the same time, Brian Daboll is a smart offensive coach. He came in to a dumpster fire of what New York, being a shell of themselves, of what they were, turned this season around, make the playoffs, beat a team who won majority of their close games and upsetted them against the Vikings. And yet Saquon, who was a very big piece as to why your offense was very viable, then all of a sudden you pay that money and Saquon's kind of going like, look, if it wasn't for what we've had efficiently and consistently, There ain't no way Daniel Jones would have carried that organization by himself. And I think we saw that by the time the line deteriorated. He suffers up an injury, and then you had to start Tommy DeVito as your third-string quarterback. This was where it was just kind of going way downhill. And I think that was what
initially. You're willing to spend all this money to get their defense built up with Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence. You bring in Isaiah Simmons and everything, which if you can get him back on track on the defensive side of the ball is a steal. And then you get Deonte Banks in last year's draft to shore up that secondary and everything. And then Tyler Nubin, which was, my opinion, was a good pickup at safety and everything. And now you're looking at the defense like, okay, if we can get the defensive side of the ball straightened out, which they fired their defensive coordinator and got somebody new, now it's just like, cool, you're getting all these pieces for the defensive side of the ball, but what are you doing to help the offense? Like, you didn't get a tight end after Darren Waller left. You drafted one in Theo Johnson, but you didn't get like a good veteran or like anybody else to help. You look at the wide receiver position and like, yeah, you went and got Jalen Hyatt, but like, who is a big name wide receiver on there other than Wan'Dale Robinson, like Darius Slayton? Like, come on, you need that explosive playmaker.
Yeah, let's see what Malik Neighbors does, because I mean, again, you want to get a playmaker there, but from what it seems like, if you've already drawn the line with your quarterback, I can only imagine what next offseason is literally going to look like, because they draft that quarterback. You're going to see this is not going to end up looking well, and they're going to start wanting to make some phone calls. And so,
yeah, they're gonna ask themselves, is Brian Daboll the issue? And like, do we give him another chance, or is it Joe Shane? And then they're also going to say, because I guarantee you, if Brian Daboll gets fired, he gets another head coaching job somewhere else.
Oh, he'll be hired
because of how good of an offensive coordinator he was, his ability to take the Giants to the playoffs the first year, and not to mention the fact that he was with the dumpster fire organization like the New York Giants. And you know for a fact that if he gets fired, he'll go to a place like it. Heaven forbid if this actually happens, I will lose my mind. Heaven forbid the Cowboys fail to reach the NFC Championship again, and Brian Daboll gets fired. I could see Brian Daboll going to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys and then have Dak Prescott become MVP the next season, and the Cowboys make it to the NFC Championship for the first time in decades.
Man, that is a big take from there. My big feeling is, I mean, if this doesn't work well with Sean McDermott after the Bills just kind of got gutted from both their receivers and their defense, Josh Allen is looking up on there and he says, I want him back. And you better make that happen. Because when your star quarterback starts speaking and this is who he succeeded with, you got to make him happy. And I think reuniting Daboll with Josh Allen would be the perfect fit at the very least with that, with how that organization runs and the way they've made that offense. You got to make Josh Allen happy there.
And with the up and coming guys like Bobby Slowick and Ben Johnson and everything, like the 2-star offensive coordinators that you're going to be looking at this next year, if you throw Brian Daboll into that mix, like as an offensive guru and an offensive mind, you're going to start looking and be like, okay, do we take a veteran offensive guy and a guy who has not had much success as a head coach winning wise, but a guy who has had one of the best years of Josh Allen's career when he was the OC, a guy who has taken them to the AFC Championship because of his play calling, the guy who basically got the Giants to a winning record and a playoff win? Or do we take a chance on these younger guys like a Ben Johnson who has guided the Lions offense to a top 5 offense, and Bobby Slowick who has made CJ Stroud look very, very dominant? You got to start questioning, like, as an owner, as a GM, like, pick between the 3, because you cannot go wrong with any of those 3. And I do feel like Ben Johnson didn't pick a team this year because the ones that he wanted were already taken by the time that, you know, the Lions were done in the playoffs, because I feel like he wanted to go to Seattle because like he had a better chance to succeed there, but they already hired Mike McDonald, and I for sure thought he was going to Washington because like he had his best, like his favorite choice of QB. He would have had a much upgraded defense, a new ownership, new GM, everything that they wanted. And, you know, it was a done deal. It was a surefire deal. The Commanders were going to offer him a contract and he was going to be their next head coach. And then he backed out at the last minute. So they went with Dan Quinn.
Yeah, because apparently he doesn't want to work with basketball guys. But yet, hey, they're giving me money and I'm spending money on the important pieces. Who cares? I mean, you can't just look at them with what they are with the Sixers. I mean, if they're giving me
Peters isn't really a basketball guy. Like they got him from the Niners organization and everything because like he was working with John Lynch, but the owner is a basketball guy. So it's just
Josh Harris.
All he is he's the guy that's signing the checks. He's not the one that's making the play or like making the deals and everything. That would be Adam Peters that is doing all the deals and everything. So it's just insane. But I do feel like the Cowboys, if they don't succeed, Mike McCarthy's going to be fired, and Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson, and Brian Daboll are going to be the three main choices that they're going to look at for the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys next year. Mark my words.
Oh, I agree. I mean, those seats are sizzling, man, and I'm just waiting to see what the season's going to look like. But yeah, there are always going to be about 7 to 8 jobs that usually open up every year in the NFL. So we'll see exactly what happens up on it. But let's get ourselves some news. Chase with the news.
This is the Hot Press.
All right, we got to see exactly what we've got up on news in store for us tonight.
Well, no news that NFL players are about it. Seen some ridiculous or crazy ones that came across, and this came across today that I was very, very shocked about. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a guy who had 1,400 yards this year with the Detroit Lions, had an oblique injury. He missed one game due to an oblique injury, but an MRI confirmed that he had his oblique completely off the bone because he had it completely off the bone, and he still played through it and still managed to get 1,400 yards and be one of the better playmakers for the Detroit Lions. I'm like, how do you even play through that pain and that injury and everything like that? And it's insane because, I think that things have changed nowadays in the NFL, because if you go back and watch the interview with Calvin Johnson and what, the rehab process and how they kept giving him shots and pills and making all the pain go away and everything. I think that it's changed now that Martha Ford's daughter has taken over, and the Lions are a completely different organization than what they were in the past.
Well, and here's what's funny about this is because when you've got a personality like Dan Campbell's, okay, I many people thought, is this guy joking when he's talking about biting kneecaps? But yet, Ben Johnson is clearly his big successor when it comes to innovative offense. And, I mean, you could say what you want to about Aaron Glenn. The defense is somewhat getting better because Brian Branch is basically hit. And there are a couple of defensive pieces that they also addressed in this draft. So, the Lions culture is starting to change from, look, we are no longer like the little kittens, like the ones that people could just basically pick on every single year, including Thanksgiving. They have now become the Lions. They have become the alphas in the room. And so I think when you instill that kind of culture in this locker room, everybody's going to buy into it. I thought the front office did a fantastic job in the last 2 years with their drafts, with their free agencies. Now, I kind of question a little that front line, but I think it'll be better. But I do think when you put that together, players are going to honestly act differently. And I think for Amon-Ra St. Brown, and many people were talking about, is he a top 5 receiver? I think he's building his way to it, but I can't put my chips in, but I love with what he's done. He's shown that he's a reliable receiver, and he's also shown that in crucial moments, he's a guy that I want to trust throwing the football to give me extra yards or give me a score. So, I mean, the guy is absolutely a freak of nature, and I think if I got this production again this next season, I think I could kind of make an argument there.
Yeah, and it is insane, the arguments that are being made about him. But let's stick with the NFL here and talk about an NFL draft lottery that people are bringing up, and even the commissioner is thinking about an NFL draft lottery. So a draft lottery has worked well for the MLB, for the NBA, and for the NHL. But many are questioning if it's going to work for the NFL or not. And, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, well, can you imagine if the Kansas City Chiefs got the number 1 overall pick? I'm like, that's not how a draft lottery works. A draft lottery, from my understanding, is that since there's 32 teams in the NFL, it'd be the top or the lower 16 that would get the choice of being in the running for the number 1 overall pick. But like, I see people's argument. Imagine like a team, like let's say the Seattle Seahawks, for instance, like they just missed out on the playoffs this year. Imagine them going from like the number 8 or 9 seed in the NFC and like probably the 15th seed overall in the NFL or the playoff seeding. Imagine them getting the number 1 overall pick and being able to choose the quarterback of, you know, the future that they need. And then you got all these other QB needy teams. My opinion, I don't think an NFL draft lottery should work or is the answer for how we go about the draft.
Well, here's the difference, is when you look at the other 3 major sports, I mean, my kind of case in point right now is I think if you're the NBA, I think for as long as you've been doing this draft lottery, I mean, these are a lot of the bottom tier teams that have been, they're trying to draft and develop. They don't have the money markets like a Los Angeles or a Chicago or a New York. And so it now kind of makes them the bottom half feeders that are just basically feeding a lot of these potential superstars into these big money markets because they're capable of paying them. And it's the same that we can even say for Major League Baseball, because look at the Nationals, look at the A's, look at Chicago, look at the White Sox. I mean, these teams you already know are basically dumpster fires, because how long have we, for over 20 years since we've watched the A's Moneyball effect, now look who's figuring it out. The Yankees, in some ways, it took them a little bit of time, but they're starting to figure it out. The Dodgers have been notorious of figuring this out. So in some ways, like, I think NHL's done a great job with the draft lottery because it's a draft and development. They've developed, because it usually takes about 2-3 years with these kids. NBA, it's a little different because in the NBA, I got kids in the G League. I got kids that are basically like in college that, you know, the one and done deal has not quite panned out for them. The difference with the NFL and all 3 of these is, number one, the talent is too great. It's way too rich. I got players who could play right now. And so if you gave, and I totally understand it too, when you get the 16, like the worst teams from there with the draft lottery pick, what are the chances at least 8 of those 16 teams are just one move away to where they could potentially end up winning this whole thing? That poses a bigger argument from there. So I feel like the draft is fine. I don't even think you need to put a lottery up into this because the talent is too rich. I think owners, like the general managers, have gotten smarter and they are very cap competitive. So they've worked where they're getting talents that they know that they can get out of the draft, and they can also get players in trade deadlines or even trading them in the off season, depending on if the price is right. And then at the same time, you're getting veteran vocal leaders to put everything together that makes it a potential Super Bowl team. Because you see what everybody wants to play with Kansas City at this point. When you got a Patrick Mahomes and an Andy Reid, I mean, the chances are limitless to getting into the Super Bowl and getting into the playoffs, which is what everybody does. But I think with what you're going to see this season, I feel like is going to be the utmost competitive I think we have ever seen since watching football. I think many teams, there are probably going to be about 3, 4, maybe possibly 5 teams with worst records. And then I feel like for the rest of them, they may be right there about 500, if not a game or two above 500. That's what I feel like with what I'm going to get this season. I just don't think adding a lottery really does kind of solve everything. I just think the talent is too rich. The caps have been so competitive with these GMs. Why even try to change that?
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it's just not to mention you've also have, the reason why it works for like the other teams and stuff, like you said, with the MLB, they've got like minor league farm clubs that you got all these guys that can build through there and like so many prospects that they can trade away that you can't really do that in the NFL. Like you can trade prospects, you can trade picks and everything, but like you can't really trade the players. Now we're moving on to the final piece of news. We're going to stick with the NFL because that's pretty much what a lot of the news is today. Roger Goodell has been pushing hardcore to try to get some more expansion teams into the NFL, and he wants to try to get up to a minimum of like 36 and make it at 36 teams and a maximum of 40. And he said he wants to try to get an international division, like an entire division of international teams. And, the whole argument about the whole international division is far-fetched because talking with all the ownership groups, there's a lot of questions that they had concerns with. One being that how are you going to get an international division over in London or Germany or whatever, and how are you going to get the stadium? How you like what ownership is going to be? How are you going to have an American team over in Europe, but then have somebody in America own them and not anybody in? And it's just like a whole bunch of issues that are going back and forth. So he's trying to figure out how he would make that work and see if, American funding from the NFL itself and ownership groups and whatnot would take and go fund a stadium to be built over there so that way American football can be played. And so he's going back and forth with a bunch of the ownership groups trying to figure out how these expansion teams are going to come into play, what cities they're going to have, and where, like, how the international game plan is going to be. And right now, they're pushing back hardcore on the international stance, but the owners don't care if they bring more teams in the U.S. in the mix because they think it'd be more fun for the game of football. And that's all I have for the news. I do have to hop off here in the next 10-15 minutes, so I'll let you get your take on that. What's your thought about the whole international teams and expansion?
Well, here's my thing about this is we've got Copa America going on right now. Like with all these international countries, that is nearly impossible to basically steer away a lot of these international fans where majority of them are all soccer fans. So that's very hard to try to steer them away to where you could potentially get American football fans involved. Now, I am impressed with what the NFL has done as far as recruiting and scouting talent internationally, which not a lot of them, it's only been a small handful that have actually worked out. So I can't really roll the dice onto what I basically have gotten out in the last 2 seasons. But we did have an international league years ago, way years ago, where we had this was basically teams that were generated from Europe. But that league didn't last very long, because number one, the talents were not translating into the NFL level. They were just basically international players that were coming in. They tried out, they participated, but it was very, very hard for them because here's the problem. Do they even have a collegiate stadium internationally, like a collegiate system? That's what's hard. So, because every year, this is why we love college football, is because every year we could get a product out of any of these respective collegiate systems, and they're ready to roll right now. So I just think internationally, I don't see this working because, look,
I don't either.
You watch Major League Baseball when we get the World Baseball Classic every year, and then the Olympics for basketball with our USA team that we have right now, and then with Copa America and then the World Cup. like I don't think NFL has that much resource compared to what.
According to Goodell, like we have sold out at Wembley Stadium whenever we've been there. We've sold out at Germany. We sold like at Tottenham Hotspur. We sold out in Brazil when we went down there. We sold out in Mexico City, and like they said that like there is a lot of fans over in Europe that are supporting the NFL, wearing NFL jerseys, NFL merchandise, wanting to have more and more games over there each year and whatnot. And like that was his argument for this, like this whole expansion to the international waters type thing.
I mean, like I said, I just don't see this really working out well. I just think because the international pool, like, it's not like, here's the thing. I love the fact that we're traveling around the world, but to make that to where we're trying to build teams internationally, like, I just don't think you're going to get the same similar thing. I feel like if you're trying to make a division like that, that division is not going to, they're not even going to smell, and no disrespect to either of them, they're not going to smell above 500. I'm sorry. They're not going to do, because by the time they come into the U.S., with the amount of talent, with the amount of coaching, with the amount of just like, with what we've already built, like since football even existed, that's going to be hard for international countries to really like try to create repercussions of, right? Because they have been so fixated on soccer and so many of these other international sports these days. Like, I mean, I just don't know if that really might work out.
Yeah, in my opinion, I like some of the choices that they were thinking about in America here to build, stadiums and have teams. Like one of the choices was Honolulu, and they've got a professional stadium there already because they used it for the Pro Bowl. They've had a lot of NFL players come out of Hawaii that have been very successful in the NFL. Danny Shelton, one of them. I know that Vita Vea has been from Honolulu. Tua, his brother Talia. You've got a lot of guys coming from Honolulu or just Hawaii in general. And, somebody told me like, oh, you're going to have a lot of issues because, it's a small island. You're going to have a lot of tourists. Nobody's going to want to travel over there to see their team. And I'm like, yeah, you will. And then like another choice that they had was Portland, Oregon, or even North or South Dakota, having a team in the Dakotas, and there's a lot of choices that they were thinking about. And, I know one city in particular is Orlando, like the governor, or I mean, not the governor, the mayor and, a bunch of people in the city have been petitioning for a baseball team down there, and they said that they would welcome a football team with open arms down there as well to bring in more revenue, more people to the city and more people to the state of Florida and everything, and it would just be different. So some of the places that they're looking at, I look for an expansion team or two, maybe even three in the next 5 to 10 years, because I think it's going to happen in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, if they can figure this out. But I think for the U.S., if you give me more expansion teams, that means more games, that means more television streaming, that means more of those opportunities where more new money's going to start to come in. But 2 locations, at least, for the Pro Bowl. Give me Hawaii and give me Vegas. Those are the only 2 locations you should be switching back and forth with every other year. So one year I go to Hawaii, the other year I'm going to the bright lights of Las Vegas. Why not? That's my only 2 best case scenarios when it comes to that. But interesting. All right, well, there was Chase with the news.
This is the Hot Press.
Good stuff today, man. And I absolutely loved what Luke Hedrick basically said. I mean, the fact that, again, many teams, here's the thing. You're going to start multiple ways. Are you going to basically get a lot of your mistakes out early, and then you become a greater team afterward? We've seen this with a lot of them. Many people didn't believe the Washington Nationals were going to be World Series champions until they just went on a wild run in 2019.
And they were the last wild card spot too.
Yeah. So it's like, it doesn't even matter what your seeding really is. Is like, my question is, are we an unstoppable force to the teams that we know that we can compete with? The Phillies, the Dodgers, all those other teams. I just feel like they get a move or two that were very pivotal in what we saw in the 21 season.
Nobody thought the Diamondbacks last year at like a record of like 88 and like 86 would make it all the way to the World Series.
Oh, yeah. No, I think baseball, it's a totally different game. It's the same way.
So unpredictable.
It's the same way I feel about with the Stanley Cup final. Like, because anytime the Stanley Cup playoffs are on, you're in a totally different breed. You're in a different beast from there. You're getting tested, and that's where a lot of those teams, that's where they were built for this. Yeah. Home run derby contestants are finally out. Oscar Hernandez made the last spot. Yeah. Pete Alonso wants to reclaim his crown. So, I'm excited for it, but I was talking with somebody about it, quick note, but he is absolutely distraught of the fact that Pete Alonso is going to be the starting first baseman in the All-Star game over Christian Walker. I agree. Because Christian Walker's been on a tear in the last month and a half, almost 2 months. And he's hit six home runs in Dodger Stadium already this year. This All-Star game is going to be I just thought, wow, unbelievable. But, yeah. And Francisco Lindor snubbed out of the All-Star game with the numbers he's been putting up. Yeah. I just am like, look, I get it if you want to make it guilty by association because of the Mets, but I felt like statistically he's up there with Shohei Ohtani and the rest of them in the top 10 categories. So that's interesting. I
agree.
But yeah. Yeah, we got a full plate tomorrow. 3 interviews, both about the Clippers, and one, finally, I could get some clarity about the Vegas Golden Knights. It is going to be a fun night tomorrow night when we got that many interviews. And then I'm off come Monday because, taking the day off, got some family coming into town. We're going to Waterworld. I'm going to be I'm going to be spending my day up into the water park and just enjoying it, probably screaming my head off. But, that's what's fun about vacations these days. So
absolutely.
Yeah, but all right, that's going to do it for both Chase and I here up on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Appreciate all of you guys for being up on here. Luke Hetrick, shout out to him, man, bringing in the hardcore stuff when you watch him up on television in the Atlanta area. Really, really good. We got ourselves probably the biggest fan now on this show. Sponsored by BetUS. When you guys end up getting $50 or more into your deposit, 200% bonuses, and 30 risk-free bets. How could you say no to that? Second chances for you guys to basically win and earn some money. And even checking out the casino entertainment that BetUS has. They've been doing this for over 30 years. Best sports book when it comes to single and parlay bets. Give them a try at BetUS.com. BetUS, where the game begins, and SeatGeek. Because Chase and I know what it's like to have the best seats in the house, whatever it may be. Sport, entertainment, concerts with your favorite artists, and comedy shows, or whatever your interests are. SeatGeek has you covered in that. $20 off by using promo code SNAKESPORTS so that you guys are able to enjoy the best seat in the house at the most affordable prices. We know inflation sucks, but at least SeatGeek is guaranteed to give you the best seat without even having to strain your wallet. So you can enjoy it. Hell, have a brewski on me. Because that's usually how it always is, man. I trust SeatGeek with everything. SeatGeek, don't lose your seat when you use SeatGeek today. But Chase and I here on the show. We'll see you guys tomorrow night on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, you guys.